of our separation, and your support from both of us is very much appreciated.
For months after his marriage ended, Eamonn Holmes said nothing about his separation from his on-air sweetheart, Ruth Langsford, and no one knew why he had decided to keep mute all this while. Now, at 66, Eamonn has finally spoken about the divorce, and it's unsettling. What did he say after so long? Join us as we uncover this surprising revelation. The television partnership. Long before Eamonn Holmes became half of a famous presenting couple, he was already a commanding presence on screen. Born in Belfast, he began his broadcasting career in Northern Ireland during the late 70s. He worked with Ulster Television, learning the mechanics of live news, timing, and audience connection in the television golden age. Those early years shaped him. He developed a direct delivery style which was confident and still conversational. His real breakthrough came when he joined GMTV in the early 90s. Breakfast television in Britain was fiercely competitive at the time, and GMTV needed strong personalities who could hold attention from the early hours. Eamonn quickly became one of its defining figures. He fronted major stories, handled live interviews with politicians and celebrities, and became a regular face in households across the country. He was dependable, sharp, and so good he stayed 10 years with his employers. After leaving GMTV in 2005, he transitioned to Sky News, where he hosted Sunrise. Sky News placed him at the center of breaking news coverage, political shifts, and global events. The opportunity was perfect, and in a few years, Eamonn had established himself. Ruth Langsford's professional path had a different but equally steady outlook. She entered broadcasting through regional television, working in continuity, announcing and local programming. Her early work may not have had the scale of national morning television, but she enjoyed the experience of connecting naturally with viewers. Her national breakthrough came when she joined This Morning in the late 90s. At that time, This Morning was already an established daytime institution on ITV. The show blended lifestyle segments, celebrity interviews, consumer advice, and real-life discussions. Ruth became one of its regular presenters. Why not? She was warm, flexible, and could think fast. Unlike hard news broadcasting, daytime television relies heavily on chemistry and emotional intelligence. Viewers tune in not only for information, but for companionship. Ruth's presence fit that world. She became known for her balanced interviewing style and an ability to navigate both lighthearted and sensitive conversations without theatrical drama. This is where the connection happened.
Ruth insisted that I make my ring tighter. Didn't you, darling?
By the early 2000s, both Eamonn and Ruth were well established in British television. Their professional worlds overlapped naturally. Both operated within ITV's ecosystem. Both understood live broadcasting pressures. When they began appearing together more frequently on This Morning, it felt like the right chemistry. Industry coverage at the time framed them as reliable, two professionals who knew the rhythm of live television. That shared understanding would later become central to their brand as a couple. But in these early professional years, the foundation was simply competence. What is important to understand in this phase of their story is that neither of them needed the other to validate their careers. Eamonn had already anchored national news for years. Ruth had secured her position within one of Britain's most watched daytime shows. Their eventual partnership was just a fusion of two paths. By the time their on-screen pairing became a regular fixture, audiences were watching two familiar figures whose careers had matured independently. That independence would later shape how the public reacted when their relationship changed. Because people did not see them as a single manufactured entity. They remembered who they were before the shared brand. Two promising TV personalities finding a bond behind the camera. And this was only beginning of their story. A live wedding. This Morning had always depended on chemistry between its presenters. The format blends celebrity interviews, lifestyle advice, consumer segments, and emotional real-life stories. The hosts had to move seamlessly between light conversation and serious discussion within the same broadcast. When Eamonn and Ruth began fronting the Friday editions more consistently, viewers saw a couple who already understood each other's rhythms. Their exchanges were relaxed and often playful. Eamonn brought the sharpness of a seasoned news anchor, while Ruth brought the emotions. On screen, that combination worked. In fact, it felt lived in. As the years progressed, their marriage became part of their public appeal. They married in 2010 at Elvetham Hall in Hampshire, after more than a decade together. The wedding received huge coverage, largely because viewers already felt invested in them as a couple. Their Friday hosting slot became a defining feature of the program. While other presenters rotated through the week, Eamonn and Ruth became strongly associated with the end-of-week edition. Ratings showed that Friday episodes maintained steady viewership during their tenure. People tuned in knowing they were in for a show. There would be light disagreement over small matters, gentle teasing, and the occasional visible eye roll from Ruth when Eamonn made a dry remark. They were everything the viewers wanted to see. Beyond this morning, Ruth continued appearing on Loose Women, where she discussed current affairs, relationships, and personal experiences alongside other panelists. Eamonn continued balancing daytime work with more news-focused broadcasting roles. Their professional independence remained intact, yet their joint appearances strengthened the perception that they were one of British television's most stable married duos. They also participated in charity events, public appearances, and interviews together. They spoke about balancing work schedules, raising their son Jack, and maintaining privacy despite public careers.
Listen, we never hide the fact that we do have our disagreements, as you know. I think that's very normal. And I think actually that's what people like watching.
I'd like it to be less normal.
Unlike some television partnerships that rely on exaggerated energy, Eamonn and Ruth appeared comfortable and authentic. If a segment went unexpectedly emotional, they handled it with composure. If a celebrity interview turned lighthearted, they leaned into the humor without overperforming. They always knew what to do, how to do it, and why. In 2020, ITV announced adjustments to the This Morning presenter lineup. Eamonn and Ruth were replaced as regular Friday hosts, with Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary stepping into that slot. ITV described the change as part of a refresh. The announcement generated significant public reaction. Many viewers expressed disappointment on social media, reflecting how closely the pair had become tied to the program's identity. Although they continued presenting on selected episodes, their reduced role marked a turning point. Around this same period, Eamonn began speaking publicly about chronic back pain that had increasingly affected his mobility. He underwent spinal surgery and later discussed ongoing complications in interviews with publications such as The Sun and The Mirror. He described struggling with nerve pain and difficulty walking. These health challenges inevitably affected his broadcasting routine and public appearances. Through these professional adjustments and personal health difficulties, their joint television presence slowly became less central to ITV's weekly schedule. Yet, the public memory of them as a married presenting team remained strong. Years of shared broadcasts had built that image viewers remembered. By the time wider industry controversies began reshaping daytime television in the early 2020s, Eamonn and Ruth's place within it had already evolved. They were no longer the permanent Friday anchors, but they were still recognized as part of the program's recent history. Viewers had spent many mornings watching them navigate interviews, lifestyle segments, and live mishaps together. Their on-screen marriage had become more than a professional arrangement. It had become part of British daytime culture. That identity would later influence how audiences processed the news of their separation, because for many people, the partnership was more than television. It was live. Let's get to the not-so-good parts. Shifts and changes. The favorite Friday hosts of This Morning experienced more changes and less screen time as time went by. Eamonn also faced serious health challenges. He underwent a double hip replacement, and in later years he required spinal surgery to address severe back issues. While these physical challenges were unfolding, another major professional decision altered the course of his career. In 2022, Eamonn left ITV entirely and joined GB News as a presenter. His move represented a shift from daytime lifestyle programming to a more opinion-driven news environment. GB News positioned itself as an alternative voice within British broadcasting, and Eamonn became one of its prominent faces. Ruth, on the other hand, remained with ITV, continuing her role on Loose Women and appearing on This Morning during holiday coverage. Their professional paths, once closely aligned within the same network, were now separate. Eamonn was no longer the Friday morning co-host, making chemistry with Ruth. He was anchoring current affairs discussions in a channel that was not ITV. The television industry itself was also experiencing turbulence. In 2023, This Morning faced intense public scrutiny following the departure of Philip Schofield after his admission of an undisclosed relationship with a younger colleague. The controversy dominated British media coverage for weeks and triggered wider conversations about workplace culture within daytime television. Although Eamonn and Ruth were not central figures in that scandal, Eamonn did speak publicly on GB News about what he described as long-standing issues within the program. These external pressures formed part of a broader backdrop. The program, where they had built much of their shared identity, was undergoing change. Management structures were being questioned. Presenter lineups were evolving. The stability that once defined their working environment was no longer certain. Through all of this, Ruth continued maintaining her presence on ITV. She remained a regular panelist on Loose Women and upheld her role as a trusted daytime presenter. She was steady and professional, even as speculation occasionally surfaced about the couple's future. Neither publicly suggested at that time that their marriage was in immediate difficulty. Instead, their lives appeared to be moving in different professional directions. Eamonn's health battles added another layer of complexity. Recovery from spinal surgery is not that simple, and he acknowledged setbacks in interviews. There were periods when he was absent from his broadcasting duties at GB News due to medical complications. The physical strain of chronic pain can affect mood, routine, and energy levels, although he consistently expressed determination to continue working. By the early part of 2024, the change was definite. Their careers no longer intersected on a daily basis. Ruth and Eamonn were once again prominent broadcasters, working apart from each other. It was the same job, same industry, but different company names. As the spring of 2024 approached, observers could see that their public lives had diverged in visible ways. What remained unseen at that point was how those shifts were influencing their private relationship. That would become clearer when the official announcement arrived. This is where it gets really bad. Stay tuned. The separation announcement. In late May 2024, Eamonn Holmes and Ruth Langsford confirmed that they had separated and were in the process of divorcing after 14 years of marriage and more than 27 years together as a couple. The announcement was delivered through a formal statement shared with the press. The statement explained that the couple had separated and were in the process of divorcing. It also asked for privacy and understanding during what was described as a difficult time. The wording was measured and respectful.
Together, I think they got married in 2010, but they've been together as a duo for much longer than that, 24, 25 years.
There was no public blame, no detailed explanation, and no indication of a sudden event that had triggered the decision. All it did was signal the end of a long partnership with restraint. The news moved quickly. Commentators described the split as the end of one of daytime television's most recognizable marriages. For many viewers, the announcement carried emotional weight because they had watched the couple work together for years. Their shared presence on This Morning had created a sense of familiarity that blurred the line between professional partnership and personal life. Reports confirmed that the decision had been made privately before the public statement was issued. There was no suggestion of a public argument or dramatic confrontation preceding the announcement. Coverage suggested that the separation had been handled quietly before being publicized. The timing of the announcement also drew attention. It came after a period in which both had been working separately for different networks. Speculation inevitably followed. However, at the point of the announcement, no detailed reason for the breakdown was provided by either party. The absence of explanation left room for commentary, but confirmed information remained limited to the fact of separation and the initiation of divorce proceedings. Their son Jack, who had grown up largely outside intense media scrutiny despite his parents' public roles, was mentioned in coverage as a casualty of the separation. Thankfully, at the time of the separation, he was an adult, so there were no custody disputes or indication of conflict regarding family arrangements. Public reaction was immediate on social media platforms. Many viewers expressed surprise, describing the couple as steady and long-standing. Others reflected on the difficulty of maintaining a relationship under constant public visibility. Within days of the announcement, additional reports surfaced indicating that Eamonn had begun a new relationship with a woman named Katie Alexander, a relationship counselor. This development was covered widely. The timeline of that relationship became part of the media conversation, although neither Eamonn nor Ruth publicly detailed how it intersected with the formal separation timeline. Ruth continued her scheduled appearances on Loose Women following the announcement. Viewers and commentators observed her return to the panel, noting her composure. ITV did not alter her role within the program. Eamonn also continued his broadcasting duties at GB News, maintaining his regular slot despite the intense public interest surrounding his personal life. For years, their marriage had existed alongside their careers as an almost permanent feature of their public identity. Now, the official confirmation signaled that the partnership had moved into a new legal and personal phase. There were no extended interviews or detailed narratives as to why the change had been made. All we were told was that they were separating and would appreciate privacy. Even within that restraint, the significance of the moment was clear. A relationship that had spanned nearly 3 decades, including 14 years of marriage and countless shared broadcasts, had formally ended. In the weeks that followed, the focus gradually shifted toward how each would speak about the separation in their own time. That phase would unfold differently for both of them. That phase is what we're about to unfold. Ruth's public reflection. Within days of the separation, she was back on Loose Women, seated at the familiar panel desk, continuing discussions on relationships, current affairs, and daily life. Viewers who watched closely could see that this was not an ordinary period for her, yet she maintained the same professional composure that had defined her career for decades. Over the months that followed, she began speaking more openly about the emotional impact of the breakdown. Her reflections appeared gradually through interviews. The tone of her comments was measured and personal. She described the end of the marriage as deeply painful and acknowledged that it had been one of the most difficult experiences of her life. She explained that long relationships do not unravel lightly. After more than 27 years together and 14 years of marriage, the separation represented not only the loss of a partner, but also the end of a shared future she had imagined. In interviews, she spoke about the shock of confronting such a significant life change in her 60s. She described feeling overwhelmed in the early stages and admitted that there were moments when she struggled emotionally. What stood out in her public reflections was the absence of public blame. She did not provide detailed accounts of private disagreements or assign fault. Instead, she focused on her own feelings and the process of rebuilding. On Loose Women, colleagues offered visible support. Media coverage often described her as dignified and composed. Viewers expressed sympathy, particularly because they had watched her and Eamonn present together for so many years. During this period, reports confirmed that Eamonn had entered a new relationship. The coverage of that development intensified scrutiny around the separation timeline. Ruth did not engage publicly in speculation about when that relationship began. When asked about moving forward, she spoke about focusing on herself, her work, and her family. She acknowledged that rebuilding confidence and independence after such a long partnership requires adjustment. In later interviews, she described how difficult it was to process the end of a marriage while also living in the public eye. Being a television presenter meant that she could not retreat entirely from public view. Each appearance invited attention, commentary, and questions, yet she continued to appear regularly on ITV programming, maintaining her role without interruption. Her reflections also touched on practical realities. Long marriages involve shared homes, shared finances, and intertwined routines. Adjusting to separate living arrangements requires logistical change alongside emotional acceptance. Reports indicated that she remained in the former family home, while Eamonn relocated. These adjustments were covered in tabloids, but Ruth herself kept her comments focused on personal growth rather than domestic detail. In conversations with journalists, she emphasized the importance of resilience. She acknowledged that there were days when she felt stronger and others when she felt vulnerable. She did not present recovery as immediate or simple. Instead, she described it as gradual. The honesty resonated with viewers who related to the complexity of long-term relationships ending later in life. Throughout her interviews, one consistent thread emerged. She framed the separation as painful but not defining. Her identity, she made clear, extended beyond her marriage. She had been a broadcaster before she married, and she remained one afterward. The distinction echoed the early years of her career when she established herself independently within daytime television. People often contrasted her openness with Eamonn's more restrained approach. While he continued his broadcasting work with limited public commentary on the details of the separation, she was gradually articulating her emotional journey. That contrast shaped public perception, though neither engaged directly in public dispute. By late 2024, Ruth's reflections had formed a coherent narrative. She acknowledged heartbreak, yet she also projected steadiness. She kept her continued presence on national television. She adapted, let audience know that even celebrity couples face private difficulties. As her voice became clearer in interviews, attention naturally turned to Eamonn and how he would frame the end of the marriage in his own words. That next phase introduced a different tone and shifted the public conversation once again. Keep watching to hear what he had to say. Eamonn breaks the silence. After the separation was confirmed, Eamonn Holmes did not immediately sit down for a detailed interview about the end of his marriage. He continued hosting his program on GB News, maintaining his usual schedule despite the intense public attention. His approach in the early months following the announcement was noticeably restrained. While Ruth gradually shared her emotional reflections in interviews, Eamonn limited his public comments about the breakdown itself. GB News remained his professional base during this period. Since joining the channel in 2022, he had anchored regular segments focused on current affairs and political discussion. However, his personal circumstances soon became part of public attention for a different reason. Word spread that he had begun a relationship with Katie Alexander, a relationship counselor based in Yorkshire. Photographs of them together were published, and the relationship quickly became a topic of discussion within entertainment reporting. It was in this same period that his health challenges continued to draw attention. Eamonn did acknowledge the relationship indirectly, through public appearances and social settings. He was seen attending events with her, and the visibility of those appearances confirmed that he was moving forward personally. While he did not provide detailed commentary about the end of his marriage, his actions made clear that his life had entered a new chapter. When addressing his personal life, he maintained greater caution. There were no extended sit-down interviews or public disputes. Nothing much was said for viewers to get anything out of. Where Ruth was reserved and focused only on her emotions, Eamonn kept a tight lip. At times, he alluded to the idea that the separation had not been sudden. Reports indicated that he suggested privately that difficulties had developed over time rather than emerging unexpectedly. He never gave any public explanations to this claim, though. His relocation also became part of public reporting. It was confirmed that he had moved out of the former family home. Such changes are common during divorce proceedings. Yet in the context of a long public marriage, even routine logistical shifts attracted attention. Despite this, he continued presenting his program and participating in public events. The reaction to his new relationship was mixed among sections of the public. Some expressed support for his decision to move on, while others questioned the timing. These reactions played out largely in media commentary and social media discussions, rather than through direct statements from him. He did not engage in public arguments about the coverage. Throughout this phase, one consistent pattern emerged. Eamonn chose to prioritize continuity in his professional life. He maintained his broadcasting responsibilities, attended scheduled engagements, and avoided detailed public debate about his marriage. While Ruth articulated her emotional recovery in interviews, he framed his transition more through action than explanation. The difference in tone between them became noticeable in coverage. By early 2025, the separation had evolved into a settled reality rather than breaking news. Eamonn remained at GB News. His relationship with Katie Alexander continued to attract media attention. His health remained an ongoing concern, with periodic updates about recovery and treatment. As time moved forward, the focus began shifting away from the immediate shock of the announcement toward the broader question of what their lives would look like independently. That final stage centers on where matters stand now, both legally and publicly, and how the long-standing television partnership has transitioned into separate paths. Where they are now. As the months passed after the separation announcement, the immediate shock that surrounded the news slowly settled into a new reality. What had once been headline-breaking became part of an ongoing adjustment. The divorce proceedings, first confirmed in May 2024, continued privately through legal channels. Neither Eamonn Holmes nor Ruth Langsford provided detailed public updates about the legal process itself. It was reported that the proceedings were underway, but there were no dramatic court revelations or public disputes placed on record. Living arrangements had changed. Reports confirmed that Eamonn had moved out of the former family home, while Ruth remained there. Such transitions are common in long-term separations, especially when a shared property has been central to family life for many years. Their son Jack, now an adult, was not the subject of custody discussions in media coverage. The emphasis instead remained on the practical untangling of a nearly 3-decade partnership. Professionally, both continued working without interruption. Ruth remained firmly positioned within ITV's daytime programming. She sustained her role on Loose Women, appearing regularly and participating in discussions that often touched on relationships, independence, and life transitions. Viewers who had followed her career for decades saw consistency in her presence. She did not retreat from public life, nor did she rebrand herself dramatically. Instead, she maintained the career she had built long before her marriage became central to her public identity. Eamonn continued anchoring his program on GB News. Despite ongoing health challenges related to his back and mobility, he stayed visible within the channel's lineup. There were occasional reports of temporary absences linked to medical treatment or recovery, but his professional role remained intact. Eamonn's new relationship with Katie Alexander also remained part of public attention. Public appearances together confirmed that the relationship was established and ongoing. In the immediate aftermath of the announcement, much of the reaction centered on surprise. For years, viewers had associated them with stability. People looked to them as a warm, professional couple with a steady foundation and a future as sure as the next edition of a favorite television show. Over time, however, the tone shifted from shock to acceptance. People stopped probing. The narrative became less about a sudden split and more about two individuals moving forward separately after many years together. Since the couple would not tell what happened and how it happened, what else was there to do but give them their privacy and move on? There were zero confrontations and no competing interviews offering contradictory accounts of events. That absence shaped how the story developed. Coverage focused on observable facts rather than escalating conflict. Entertainment pages reported on appearances, professional milestones, and occasional remarks, but neither party engaged in prolonged public dispute. The wider context of British daytime television also continued to change. This morning remained under public scrutiny following earlier controversies, and ITV's presenter landscape continued evolving. Within that shifting environment, Eamonn and Ruth's former status as a married hosting duo gradually became part of the program's history rather than its present. For viewers who had watched them for years, the adjustment required recalibration. The familiar Friday pairing that once defined the end of the week was no longer a norm. Instead, each appeared in separate broadcasting worlds. Ruth within ITV's established daytime structure, Eamonn within a more politically focused news environment. Financial and property matters, often central in high-profile divorces, were not detailed extensively in mainstream reporting. News outlets acknowledged that legal arrangements would follow standard procedures for long marriages, but specific figures and settlements were not publicly disclosed. The relative privacy of that aspect distinguished their separation from more combative celebrity divorces. Health remained a continuing factor in Eamonn's public life. Updates about his recovery from spinal complications were discussed and viewed from time to time. He continued to speak candidly about chronic pain and rehabilitation, framing it as an ongoing challenge rather than a resolved issue. His determination to remain on air, despite those obstacles, formed part of his present identity. Ruth's narrative, meanwhile, centered on resilience. Interviews reflected her adjustment to single life in her 60s, a transition she acknowledged as significant. She described rebuilding routines and rediscovering independence after decades within a shared structure. Her professional continuity reinforced the sense that, although her personal circumstances had changed, her public role remained stable. As of early 2025, the story no longer revolved around announcement, but around continuation. Two established broadcasters who once shared a sofa each week were now pursuing separate futures. The legal process moved forward out of public view. Their son remained largely outside media attention. Their careers persisted along distinct paths. The legacy of their partnership remains part of British daytime television history. Years of joint presenting shaped audience memory. Yet the present is defined not by that shared past, but by individual trajectories. Eamonn Holmes remains a news presenter, navigating health recovery and a new relationship. Ruth Langsford remains a daytime television figure, rebuilding her life while maintaining her professional standing. There has been no dramatic public reckoning, no detailed expose altering the core facts that were confirmed in the original statement. The essential truth remains straightforward. After nearly 3 decades together and 14 years of marriage, they separated and began divorce proceedings. They continued working. They adjusted privately while remaining visible publicly. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.